Hey there, y'all. Nice to see you. I mean, I'm not really seeing you, but we're doing our best. Time for just another quick little introduction video. This time we are getting underway with Chrétien de Troyes, and he is going to give us our next couple of texts, which are both longer form romances about King Arthur and his knights. So you can see I started us off here with a pretty classic King Arthur image, right? We're looking here at the Holy Grail appearing in the middle of the round table, and you can see everybody's pretty like astonished. They're like, whoa, this is crazy. And you may feel the same when we're reading some of Chrétien's romances, because boy, there's some crazy shit that goes down in these stories, which is why I love them. And I look forward to talking about them with you over the next couple of weeks. So who is Chrétien de Troyes? Well, I wish we knew. He's kind of just a cipher, which is why I went with this kind of cheesy, like hooded figure, random picture to depict him, because we really don't know very much about him. We just know his name. Um, he tells us in the start of one of his romances that his name is Chrétien de Troyes, and that means that he's identifying himself with this city of Troyes, which is in the province of Champagne. And yes, like the bubbly wine, right? Like that's where he's from. And the other things that we know about him are about his patrons, and we'll get to those in just a second. Um, but he's writing primarily in the 1170s to about the early 1190s, but he's mostly active in the 1170s and 1180s. And he's the author of like definitely 5, but maybe 6 courtly romances. There's this one called William of England, and there's a lot of debate about whether or not he wrote it. Kind of like, Shakespeare plays, like some people are like, oh, did he really write this or whatever? But generally speaking, everyone agrees that there are 5 romances that he wrote, and we're going to be reading 2 of them together over the next couple of weeks. So a little bit about those patrons, as I said, these are the people that help us learn the most about Chrétien. And the one that we're going to focus on, because both of the romances that we are going to read together are in some way associated with her court and this time period. Her name is Marie de Champagne. And in case you wonder, like, is every woman in the 12th century in France named Marie? Like, no, they're not. We just happen to have 2 of them come up. It is a pretty common name for obvious reasons. If you are religious and you are aware of the influence of the Virgin Mary in medieval Christianity, it makes sense, right? That a lot of people would name their children, their daughters, Marie. So let's talk a little bit about Marie. Who was she? She was the Countess of Champagne, and she lived from 1145 to 1198. She was the daughter of King Louis VII and Eleanor of Aquitaine. Eleanor of Aquitaine, y'all, was like such a badass. Like, if you are interested in fascinating historical figures, especially women who broke a lot of barriers and did a lot of things that you would not necessarily expect to see women do at the time, you have to look up Eleanor of Aquitaine. She was married to 2 kings, first Louis VII of France and then Henry II of England, and she lived quite an amazing life. But this is not about her, this is about her daughter, who is a badass in a different way. So let's talk about Marie. She ruled over extensive lands in the province of Champagne. Excuse me. She first started ruling as regent, which is what you call somebody who is like completely in charge. They have all the power of a king or a queen in a region, but they aren't like officially crowned as that person. So her husband went away on pilgrimage to the Holy Land in 1179. He was gone for a couple of years, and during that time, she ran this huge province and oversaw all of the estates and all of the work, and supported all of the people who lived and looked up to her and needed her and depended upon her, really. So to make sure that they could have the necessities of daily life. Her husband, also named Henry, like Eleanor of Aquitaine's second husband. Sorry, I don't know why I said also, but anyway. So her husband Henry came back from pilgrimage and like died like very soon after. And so Marie is there with her young son at this point, who is now officially the Count of Champagne, but he's like a tiny baby. So obviously he's not ruling, and that's left to Marie. So she is in charge of these lands for a fairly long period of time. Her court was like this amazing place where you had all of these scholars and all of these authors gathered together. And it was like this like hub of intellectual activity. And all of them, in some way or another, because Marie was their patron. Some people would call her a patroness because she's a woman, but I don't really like using that term. I think a gender neutral term works just fine here. So because Marie was their patron, along with the other women at her court, they catered to what those women wanted to hear and the kinds of stories that they wanted to listen to and be entertained by. And I really love this idea. It's a scholar named John Benton. He says that these women at Marie's court had sophisticated and eclectic tastes. So the people who were writing for them really did have to kind of like find some really cool, wide-ranging stories to focus on, to keep these women entertained. And you know, we all need entertained, especially at the end of a long day when you're ruling like really vast lands, right? So this was a really highly educated, very wealthy, very kind of like maybe out of touch with the like lives of normal people kind of audience. So just be aware of that as you're reading it, as you're reading these stories. So let's talk a little bit about Chrétien and his stories about Arthur and his court. So Chrétien does not invent stories about King Arthur. Those have existed before Chrétien, but they were all focused on like Arthur as this heroic figure, right? So the first person who really gives us King Arthur in a very serious way is an author named Geoffrey of Monmouth. And he's writing his books about 100 years before Chrétien, right after the Norman conquest, so in like the 1070s. And Geoffrey's version of King Arthur is like this amazing, crazy warlord who can like, with one swipe of his sword, kill 900 men with one blow. And they're very much about like big national events and like the destiny of England as a whole with Arthur at its helm. So those are the stories of King Arthur before Chrétien gets to them. He is looking at a very different kind of story. Chrétien's Arthurian romances are not focused on Arthur. In fact, like we see Arthur occasionally in these stories. He comes to visit, but he is not really the center of attention. He's there as the king, and the knights are out there going out and having adventures. And so Chrétien's focus is on these individual knights, and you get to learn their personalities. You understand a lot about them. You meet the ladies that they love and that they work hard to win their favor. And these stories are not about war. They're not about bloody battles. I mean, there's definitely fighting, right? There's definitely going to be lots of fighting, but they're stories about courtly behavior. And that really sets Chrétien apart from the earlier versions of King Arthur that we get, and really sets the stage for all future versions of King Arthur that come after. They're all in some way or another dependent on Chrétien's stories. And if you're interested in King Arthur, I will stop with a little plug here and say that I teach a course on King Arthur every couple of years. I think I'm teaching it in the fall semester, actually. So if you'd like to get a sense of King Arthur from his very earliest roots all the way up until the 21st century, I have a class for you. Yay. Okay, plug over. Back to Chrétien. So this world that Chrétien is depicting, in addition to being focused on like stories of individual knights, is all about like wealth and luxury and spectacle. Like we will see all kinds of banquets and amazing events and jousting and feasts and all these kinds of things. And this is really like reflecting a changing world and the changing tastes in art that come along with it. In the 12th century, we're starting to see power distributed among more people. Like, I'm not going to say that like, oh yeah, everybody's out there voting and like, you know, democracy in action. No, definitely not. But it isn't just like that there's this one king that everyone is dependent on. We are seeing a rise of power in barons and nobles, and they are trying to claim their own spaces as being powerful, benevolent rulers, but also living in this very like luxurious space where they can be benefactors to their communities as well. So this is the audience for whom Chrétien is writing and the world that he is trying to depict. So it gives us a really different sense of King Arthur than we had before, but it also gives us very much the sense of King Arthur and his knights of the Round Table that we have now. Like all of your thoughts about what Arthur's knights are like and what kind of stories these are. Definitely, we can trace that right back to Chrétien and the stories that we're going to read together over the next couple of weeks. So that's what I have for you. I think it's going to be fun to read these. They're going to be so incredibly different from the lays of Marie, right? Because those are very short and you don't get to know anybody, and plot development is really minor and character development is like nothing. Chrétien's stories are all about the characters. They're all about like getting in there and trying to understand one man or one woman and their journey through some very specific events. So a lot of people would say that like the roots of the modern novel can be traced back to Chrétien's romances. I don't know if that's really a necessary thing that we need to worry about, but if you are the kind of person who enjoys like getting into somebody's head, thinking about what they're like, what their motivations are, and why humans do some crazy ass stuff, Chrétien is definitely for you. There will be all kinds of things that will just kind of blow your mind a little bit and be like, wait, what is going on? And that's what makes them super fun. So anyway, that's what I got. Thanks so much. And I look forward to talking about these stories with you over the next couple of weeks.